Aarav Khanna and Sandhya Patel's lives seemed ordinary, a picture, perfect family in suburban New Jersey, but behind closed doors, betrayal simmered, secrets festered, and one mother's love would turn into a shocking, brutal revenge that no one saw coming. Aarav Khanna's world looked picture, perfect from the outside, the kind of life people admired from a distance without ever questioning what lay beneath the surface. He lived in a quiet neighborhood in New Jersey, where neatly painted houses lined the streets and families gathered on weekends for community events. Aarav worked as a software engineer for a respected tech company, earning a stable income and presenting himself as a responsible, committed husband. His wife, Meera Khanna, complemented this image effortlessly. She was a school counselor known for her patient nature and warm presence. Students trusted her, colleagues respected her, and neighbors often described her as the type of person who made everything feel calmer simply by being there. When Meera's mother, Sandhya Patel, moved in with them after losing her husband, the family appeared even more complete. She was gentle, organized, and deeply traditional. She believed in maintaining peace within the home and took pride in helping around the house, ensuring meals were ready, chores were done, and emotional balance was maintained. People who visited their home saw harmony, laughter, and unity. No one sensed that anything could be wrong because the Khanna household functioned smoothly on the surface. But beneath this picture of domestic stability, small changes had begun to creep in, almost silently. Aarav, once predictable with his routines, started staying out late more often. He blamed it on overtime at the office, sudden deadlines, or last-minute team meetings. At first, Meera believed him without hesitation. She was used to his career being demanding and assumed this was just another phase of increased workload. Even when dinner grew cold on the table and he arrived home hours later, she convinced herself it was temporary stress. Sandhya, however, noticed subtle signs that Meera overlooked. She had the calm wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to understand the difference between work pressure and secret behavior. Aarav had become protective of his phone, keeping it face down, taking it with him even to the bathroom. He seemed restless, as though carrying a weight he didn't want anyone else to see. He avoided eye contact during conversations, and at times he appeared irritated for no reason at all. There was a growing distance between husband and wife, something Meera sensed but didn't have the courage to confront. She feared that raising her concerns might seem like mistrust, and she valued her marriage too much to take that risk. Instead, she reassured herself that every couple went through phases of emotional disconnect. She tried harder to keep the home warm, to plan small surprises, to check in with him, believing that effort and love could fill the space that was slowly widening. Sandhya watched all of this quietly, her instincts sharpening day by day. She noticed the new shirts Aarav bought but never mentioned, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, and the small lies that slipped into his daily explanations. She told herself not to jump to conclusions, yet the uneasiness in her heart continued to grow. She began paying closer attention, observing his patterns, his expressions, and the tension that entered the room every time his phone vibrated. To outsiders, the Khanna family still looked flawless, but inside the walls of their home an invisible storm was forming, slowly, quietly, and dangerously. None of them knew then how quickly it would break open, or how deeply it would change their lives forever. Sandhya's uneasiness turned into real concern on an ordinary afternoon when a seemingly harmless notification appeared on Aarav's laptop. He had rushed out earlier than usual, leaving his device open on the dining table. Sandhya rarely touched his things, but when a message window lit up with affectionate words, her attention was pulled toward it as if by force. What she saw made her heart freeze. The message was intimate, filled with emotions that had no place in a married man's life. Her first thought was that it must be a misunderstanding, perhaps a social media prank or a harmless joke. But as more messages appeared that hope shattered, she clicked hesitantly, each line revealing the truth more clearly. The exchanges were ongoing, detailed, and far too personal to ignore. Sandhya felt dizzy, but she continued reading, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were showing her. The emotional closeness between Aarav and the woman was unmistakable. What struck her even harder was the familiarity of the name, Anisha Rao. Memories rushed back. Anisha had once been her friend, someone she knew from her earlier years in India, before life took them to different places. They had lost touch long ago, never imagining their paths would cross again in such a devastating way. Sandhya felt a deep sense of betrayal, not only on behalf of her daughter, but also personally. The idea that her old friend had become part of this hidden relationship felt like a deliberate wound. As she continued reading, she discovered that the affair wasn't just emotional. Aarav had made trips to meet Anisha secretly, claiming work commitments each time. He had promised her a future together, spoken of leaving behind everything he currently had. That included Meera. The shock of it all pressed down on Sandhya's chest like a boulder. She felt breathless, her hands trembling as she closed the laptop. 1,000 thoughts swirled inside her mind. Should she tell Meera immediately? Should she confront Aarav? Should she pretend she had seen nothing until she understood the situation better? Every option seemed painful. Sandhya decided to stay silent for the moment. She needed time to think, to observe, and to gather her emotions before taking any step. She spent the following days watching Aarav more closely. Everything she had suspected earlier started making sense. The late nights, the secrecy, the tension, the shift in his behavior. She realized he had been living a double life, one filled with lies and carefully crafted excuses. Meera continued moving through her days unaware of the storm growing inside her home. She noticed her husband's distance but blamed it on stress. She tried to create happy moments to bring them closer, but Aarav seemed increasingly uninterested. The emotional gap widened without her understanding why. Sandhya's pain deepened each time she looked at her daughter's face. The innocence, the trust, the love Meera still had for her husband made the truth feel even heavier. Sandhya struggled to hide her sorrow, pretending everything was normal while silently drowning in the knowledge she carried. At night, she replayed the messages in her mind, wondering how long this betrayal had been happening. She couldn't shake the image of Anisha smiling beside her years ago, nor could she understand how Aarav had allowed everything Meera had given him to become so meaningless. What hurt most was knowing that if she did nothing, her daughter's life would collapse without warning. Sandhya stayed quiet, but deep inside her, a powerful mix of heartbreak and anger began to grow, shaping itself into something she never imagined she was capable of. Sandhya's silence became a shield she carried day and night, hiding the truth while her mind worked tirelessly to understand what to do next. What she had discovered could destroy Meera completely, and that fear became the force that held her back from revealing anything immediately. Instead, she started observing the household like a detective living inside her own home. She watched Aarav's movements, his new habits, and the way he had emotionally drifted far from the man her daughter believed him to be. Every little detail felt like another piece of a puzzle she was forced to solve. The more she observed, the clearer the picture became. Aarav had developed a pattern. His second phone never left his pocket, and he checked it secretly, always positioning himself away from both women. His bank statements began showing unusual transactions, hotel bookings in other states, expensive dinners, and ride-hailing charges at hours he claimed to be working. He also started withdrawing small amounts of cash more frequently, as though preparing for a major change without leaving digital evidence behind. Sandhya documented everything discreetly. She wrote dates, times, receipts, and summaries of the messages she had seen. It wasn't done with the intention of building a case for authorities. Instead, she was trying to understand the depth of his betrayal and the real danger it posed to Meera's life. The more she uncovered, the more she realized that Aarav wasn't merely having an affair. He was preparing to leave, permanently and without any concern for the destruction it would cause. Meera, meanwhile, remained trapped in confusion. She felt the distance but didn't know its cause. She tried planning small surprises, searched online for ways to reconnect emotionally, and even spoke to colleagues about handling long periods of stress in marriages. She kept hoping that with patience and effort, things would return to normal. Her hope was heartbreaking for Sandhya to watch. It was like seeing someone rebuild a home that she knew had already been set on fire. A new fear began forming in Sandhya's mind. She worried that when Aarav finally left, he might manipulate things in a way that left Meera financially or emotionally broken. She feared he might blame Meera for his decision or convince her that she had failed as a wife. The possibility that her daughter might suffer from depression or emotional collapse haunted her. Sandhya's emotional state shifted slowly from heartbreak to a cold, calculated determination. She had always considered herself a patient and forgiving person, but this situation awakened a part of her that she didn't recognize. She felt protective, almost fiercely so. In her mind, Meera had given everything to this marriage: trust, love, stability, and Aarav had repaid it with deceit. It felt unfair, cruel, and dangerous. She began preparing in ways she didn't fully understand at first. She checked the condition of the house, noticed where tools were kept, and observed how easy it was to disable certain cameras around the property. She didn't have a clear plan yet, but her thoughts were taking a darker shape. Her desire to protect Meera started to override the boundaries she once believed in. Each night, she lay awake replaying possibilities. She imagined confrontations, imagined leaving, imagined telling Meera, but every scenario led to something worse. The only path that seemed to bring any form of justice or safety was one that involved removing the threat entirely. It was a terrifying thought, yet it returned to her repeatedly, stronger each time. By the end of the week, that thought was no longer a possibility. It was becoming a decision. Sandhya felt she had no choice left. To her, Aarav was no longer a son-in-law. He was a danger to her daughter's life, stability, and future, and she was ready to do whatever was necessary to protect Meera, even if it meant stepping into the darkest corner of herself. The storm arrived earlier than expected that evening, sweeping across the neighborhood with heavy rain and strong winds. Most people stayed indoors, locking windows and waiting for the weather to pass. Inside the Khanna home, the atmosphere felt even heavier than the storm outside. Sandhya had spent the entire day in a silent state of preparation. Every movement she made had a purpose. Every step taken, every object repositioned, and every detail checked was part of the plan forming in her mind. She didn't view it as committing a crime. She saw it as removing a danger that had threatened her daughter's stability and future. She waited patiently until Meera left for a school event, giving her a clear window of time in which she could act without interruption. As soon as the front door closed, Sandhya moved quickly but carefully. She turned off the security cameras connected to the garage, using knowledge she gained from maintaining the home's systems over the years. No one would question the cameras going offline during a storm. Power fluctuations were common. She then walked quietly to the garage, ensuring everything was placed to look natural. Heavy items were arranged just enough to make an accident seem possible, their balance easily disrupted by a single push or shift. Aarav returned home shortly after, drenched and frustrated. He entered through the garage as usual, the preferred door he used daily. The darkness inside didn't alarm him because the power flickered on and off throughout the area. He assumed the storm was responsible. Sandhya watched him from a shadowed corner, waiting for the exact moment. Her heartbeat pounded in her chest, but her mind remained cold and focused. Everything she had discovered over the past weeks had built up to this night. When Aarav stepped fully inside and reached for the light switch, Sandhya made her move. She pushed the heavy shelf with all her strength, letting gravity and weight do the rest. The crash was loud, but outside, thunder boomed at the same time, blending the sounds together. Aarav didn't have time to react or comprehend what was happening. The impact was immediate and final. In the moments that followed, Sandhya forced herself to stay composed. She checked his pulse briefly, confirming what she already knew. Her hands trembled slightly, but she reminded herself why she had done this. Her daughter was the only thought that mattered. She worked quickly to stage the scene, adding small touches that made the fall look accidental. Loose tools, fallen boxes, and a broken hook on the wall created the picture of a storm-induced mishap. When she stepped back, the scene looked chaotic in a believable way. Nothing suggested deliberate action. She cleaned her hands, adjusted her breathing, and made sure her expression was calm before re-entering the house. She turned on a few lights, boiled water as if preparing tea, and sat waiting for Meera to return home. She forced herself into the role of a mother having a normal evening, though her chest felt tight and her legs weak. By the time Meera arrived and discovered the scene, Sandhya was ready with shock and fear, the reactions expected from anyone confronted with sudden tragedy. Emergency services arrived quickly, but the storm and the initial setup made everything appear consistent with an accidental collapse inside the garage. Neighbors who rushed over blamed the weather immediately. Investigators who arrived later found nothing suspicious in the moment. In the quiet that followed, Sandhya told herself she had protected her daughter the only way she could. She didn't see herself as a criminal. She saw herself as a mother who had stepped into darkness so her daughter would never have to. For weeks after the incident, life in the Khanna household returned to a fragile semblance of normalcy. Meera mourned deeply, unable to believe that her husband's life had ended so abruptly. She went through the motions of grief with a hollow emptiness in her chest, relying on her mother, Sandhya, to maintain the household and offer comfort. Sandhya, in turn, stayed composed, presenting herself as a pillar of support while carrying the weight of her actions silently. The neighborhood and extended family offered condolences, accepting the story of a tragic accident caused by the storm. Everyone outside the home believed that Aarav's death was just that, a misfortune brought on by nature, nothing more. However, beneath the surface, investigators were growing suspicious. The second phone Aarav had kept hidden surfaced in digital records, revealing the affair with Anisha Rao. Forensic analysts discovered unusual travel patterns, hotel bookings, and financial transactions that did not match his reported work schedule. Slowly, the picture of Aarav's double life began to emerge. What was once assumed to be a simple accident now hinted at something far more complicated. Investigators started piecing together a timeline of his secret meetings, financial irregularities, and sudden disappearance from the expected routines at home. Despite the mounting pressure, Sandhya maintained her calm demeanor. She answered questions cautiously, never revealing the full truth, carefully navigating each inquiry with a mix of sorrow and composure. Yet forensic specialists soon noticed subtle inconsistencies at the garage. The angle of the fallen shelf, the pattern of the tools, and traces of movement that didn't align with a simple storm-related accident raised doubts. Small details that had seemed insignificant at the time now pointed to human intervention. The attention of the authorities intensified, and Sandhya could feel the net closing around her. She remained deliberate, knowing that any mistake could unravel everything. But as investigators continued to examine the evidence and interview witnesses, the psychological weight of keeping the secret began to take its toll. Sandhya realized that her actions, though intended to protect her daughter, could not stay hidden forever. One evening, after careful consideration, she made the decision to confess. She sat with the authorities and detailed everything: Aarav's betrayal, the months of planning, and the exact sequence of events that had led to his death. She explained her motives in terms of protecting Meera from emotional and financial devastation, emphasizing that her actions were calculated to minimize harm to her daughter while ensuring that Aarav could not continue his deceit. The confession shocked everyone involved. Meera, hearing the truth for the first time, was left torn between grief, anger, and disbelief. Her mother, the woman she trusted most, had orchestrated the death of her husband. Emotions collided violently inside her, leaving her numb and questioning every memory she had of her family. Sandhya was arrested, and the case drew immediate attention from local news and legal circles. People struggled to comprehend how a seemingly devoted mother and grandmother could plan such a calculated act of revenge. The investigation became a study in betrayal, loyalty, and the extremes of human emotion. Experts later reflected that Sandhya's actions, though criminal, had been driven by a combination of maternal instinct and a profound sense of justice in her own eyes. In the aftermath, Meera faced the challenge of rebuilding her life, reconciling her love for her mother with the horror of what had happened. The story became a chilling reminder of how betrayal within a family can ignite forces no one expects, transforming love into something destructive and irreversible. The case of Aarav Khanna's death remained in public memory, not just for the shocking crime itself, but for the dark and calculated path of revenge that had originated in a mother's desperate desire to protect her daughter. It revealed how far a person could go when pushed by heartbreak, betrayal, and the need to shield those they love from pain.